Hello everyone, my name is Meghan LeVota and I offer wisdom, tools, and support for personality integration. And today I'm going to be discussing integration and fragmentation. Toward the end of this video, I am going to be discussing how that relates to personality type. So if you're only here for personality type, I promise I'm going to get to that. But before that, I want to talk about integration and its opposite, fragmentation. For those of you who already watch/listen to my podcast, Synchronic Saturdays, you've heard me talk about high vibe and low vibe of each of the cognitive functions. If you've watched my recent video about You're Probably Average, that was me getting more in depth into how each of these cognitive functions can present itself or manifest itself in different ways. And there's sort of a spectrum of behavior. And since I talk about on this channel how to use your personality type to become a more integrated whole version of yourself, and that sort of goes hand in hand with Carl Jung's individualization or individuation. I get those words confused sometimes. Carl Jung's individuation process, which is the idea of integrating your shadow into your consciousness. And it's pretty much a form of self-actualization. Since Carl Jung talks about both those things, and since on my channel I'm talking about how to integrate that shadow, I figured I need to explain what integration even is, and also what the opposite of that is, which is fragmentation. And there's a lot of implications to this. A lot of you probably just know generally what that means, but getting into how it works energetically, and how pretty much when I say high vibe of a cognitive function, I'm talking about a more pure, a more integrated version of that function. Where if I was talking about a low vibe, that's a more fragmented. And most of us, depending on your cognitive type, you're going to have areas that are more integrated than others. And that's how, we all have shadow sides of ourselves, and knowing your personality type can help you with that. But anyway, integration, I've also made a video about to have integrity. To live a life with integrity means to be fully integrated. And I think that God, or the universe, or all that is divine, is the archetype of the most pure integrated thing that could ever exist. And human beings are not that way all the way, but you get to choose whether or not you are seeking to fully integrate yourself, or if the opposite energy of that would be for yourself to fragment, to divide yourself, to take parts of yourself that you don't like and set it on a shelf, and then close the door, and then lock the door, and then never look at it again. When you do that, when you fragment parts of yourself, that's when there's a monster in the closet. That's where you're hiding, there's skeletons that need to be dealt with. It's the sort of nasty part of shadow that we don't really talk about much. That's when things get twisted, because, to say this in a different way before I continue, integration, in my opinion, is pretty synonymous with the energy of love, whereas fragmentation, to me, is synonymous with the energy of fear. Now, we all have parts of ourselves that are fragmented. And looking at the general human psyche, that's why when you look at your personality type, there are parts that are in the shadow naturally. These are parts that have more of an energy of fear around them than an energy of love. And that's normal. So whenever I'm talking about fear, it's your choice whether or not you work through that fear, or if you let that fear compound to the point where you're going toward the energy of fragmentation. And I've said in another video that how to be brave is not to eliminate fear, but it's to decide to push through that fear. Because I think that each person, it's sort of like you're born with part of your psyche fully integrated, but most of it not. And we all are imperfect beings. And I've said before that knowing your type, it's like we have a gift and we also have parts where we're broken. And the journey that I'm trying to help people go on is how to put yourself back together again. How to acknowledge those broken parts and how to love them, how to take them as a part of yourself and to bring them into your consciousness. Because to love is integration. Love is taking things as part of yourself. Love is taking other people as parts of yourself. That could be their emotions, that could be their opinions. To love is to consider that other people's emotions and other people's opinions are valid and to integrate them with your own perspective. To love is not to just abandon whatever you feel or whatever you think and take what they feel or think. That's fragmentation. That is fragmenting your own and putting it away and instead worshiping or following what somebody else is saying. And integration is about pretty much consuming all of the parts in the universe and reckoning with them in the sense where if we were going to use cognitive functions as an example, maybe we'd say, okay, so FE exists. Also, FI exists. So what am I going to do about that? What could you do about that? Because it would be more of a fragmented way of looking at it to say, well, FE is right and all of you FI users are just selfish. Or it would be fragmented for FI to be like, oh, I don't need to use FE. I don't need to demonstrate how I feel. It's just in my heart and they should just read my mind. To integrate is to recognize both your consciousness and to understand and accept all that is in your shadow as well. And you see that shadow reflected in the people around you. So even if you aren't aware of your own shadow, it's going to manifest in interpersonal problems that you have with people. And if you are not integrating all of the functions into your worldview to some extent, it does cause problems. Because let's talk about the energy of fragmentation for a bit. This is pure fear. This is the energy of fragmentation is like when you're unplugging yourself from the source, and it's powerless. It is cowardice. It is fearful in the sense it is the opposite of love in every way. Most people, or many people, do fragment parts of themselves where they accept parts of themselves and they shove other things down. They repress things that they don't like. And whether you are integrating or you are fragmenting, you're still doing something, and both things compound on each other. And it's your decision what direction you're going. But both of them, I almost see them both as little snowball effects. Is you can compound your fear. Fear can compound on itself and grow bigger and bigger and bigger. You can keep dividing yourself into a million little pieces. And when you do that, those are actually the people with really big egos, because they're only conscious of such a small part of their psyche. And that small part of their psyche becomes a dictatorship of all the rest of the parts of their psyche. And that is like a very tyrannical sort of view. That's why it's interesting, because people say, like, loving yourself and integrating yourself and becoming a more powerful version of yourself, a lot of those people are accused of having big egos, which is sort of funny to me, because it's actually the people that have the smallest parts of their psyche that are conscious, that have the biggest egos, because it's almost like one little part of their psyche is completely inflated and is the only thing that they share. But beneath that is fear. Beneath that is an unawareness of who they are. They're not plugged in to the source of who they are. And so it's like that one piece that they're okay with. Oftentimes this is your dominant function, but this also can even just be as small as a character trait. Like maybe you think, oh, I'm intellectual, or maybe you think, oh, I'm a loving person, or maybe you think, I'm a really successful person. Whatever part of your psyche that you're over-identifying with, the more you over-identify, the more you're under-identifying with the things that are parts of your shadow. And the more you fragment yourself, and the smaller you are, the more fear you have, and the more that little part thinks that it's right and that it's all there is, because you're not aware of the other parts of who you are or the other parts of what other people are. And so, like, let's say if we're talking about an ESTJ that was a very fragmented person who used TE and only TE, and not only was it just TE as we know it, but it was very low vibe TE. It was whatever it is, like whatever this person says is right, or whatever I learned in school is right, end of story. Or like, let's say they have a very small scope of what is accurate. If they aren't aware, they have not, sorry, the video cut out there, but if they have not integrated those parts of themselves, then they are going to approach anyone who contradicts what they have to say. They're going to approach that as you're wrong, because it's not my description, or it's not what I think. Where the people who are more integrated people, or people moving toward integration, are going to be forced to consider everything that people say, because they're going to have to integrate whether or not that's right or wrong in their own psyche. They aren't just going to be banging people on the top of the head saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. People that do that are fearful, they're defensive, they're cowards, and they don't know themselves. They have a very, very tiny brain, but the biggest egos imaginable, because their tiny part of their psyche that they're clinging on to is a tyrant and a dictator amongst their entire being. Where the more integrated you are, the more sovereign you know that you are, and the more power you have. And it's not power in a way where it's like, oh, I think I'm better than you, but it's like the more divine power you have, the more free you are, the more freedom you have, the more yourself you are. You get to sit upon your pedestal that is yours in life. And it is the energy of love. It is taking things that as a part of yourself, everything, the earth, people that disagree with you, taking them as a part of yourself, everything. And by as a part of yourself, I don't mean shoving yourself away into a dark corner and having other, like, there's definitely people that pretend to be super loving in a fragmented way, where they are fragmenting the parts of themselves and being like, love looks just this way, and if you aren't doing it in this way, then you're wrong. And I guess the more integrity someone has, the more integrated someone is, and the more someone moves in that direction toward integrating their shadow, the more nuance there is, and the more complex they're going to be as a person, and the more complex their opinions are going to be, because they're going to have to recognize nuance. They're going to have to recognize duality. They are not going to be okay with just a small bit of the psyche. They are all-encompassing. It is true unity consciousness. It is not my way's better than your way. And so if you ever see anyone dividing, if you ever see anyone fragmenting, just be aware of that. Or if you ever catch yourself doing that, try and notice the different energies within you, the one that wants to integrate and the one that wants to fragment. And know that if you find yourself wanting to shove different parts of yourself away in a dark corner, it doesn't mean you have to sort through all your baggage and all your bullshit right now, because that can take time. The integration process is difficult, and it is very involved. But just be aware that if you are shoving things under the rug in a dark corner, you aren't getting rid of it. All you're doing is segmenting yourself from that and fragmenting yourself and becoming a less powerful version of yourself and becoming perhaps dangerous to other people. And that could be a snowball effect that people get caught up in. And it's really just so important to make sure that you aren't doing that, because I don't think that people that do that realize how much harm it causes other people and it causes the universe at large. And so all it takes is being aware. All it takes is the decision to say, I want to be a person with integrity. I want to integrate the parts of myself. I want to integrate my shadow. I want to move forward, and I want to accept other people's realities. I don't want to say my reality is the only reality. I don't want to say my opinion's the only opinion and that my feeling's the only feeling. I want to accept other people's realities as valid and integrate them with my reality. When you say that, no matter how much baggage you have to unpack, no matter how much is in the shadow, you are going toward the right direction, and you are on the path. You are on the path of individuation. And as Carl Jung says, the unconscious seeks to integrate on its own. So it's whenever you decide to be conscious of it and shine a light on that path, it becomes so much easier to it just happens naturally, because you're just pushing it in that direction. There's no more resistance that you have to deal with. So either way, the shadow wants to get plugged into the power source. The shadow wants to get plugged into all that is. So yeah, that's a little bit about duality and about integration and fragmentation and about putting yourself together again. So if you're interested in me helping you through this process, I do offer mentorship. So I have that linked below. If you're not sure what your type is, I do offer typing services. And I believe that knowing your type is very important to knowing what parts you may or may not need to still integrate. And also, if you have a one-off question about this, I do have consulting questions that you can reach out to me, and I can just get into one of these things more in depth and clarify it for you of what I'm trying to explain. So thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day.